What is a past life regression? Past life regression is literally a return to that first moment, in this case, incarnation, when you have experienced that issue and that problem that is bothering you right now in your current life. It's a very, very powerful method for clearing what's called emotional residue from that past life, when you probably have experienced that betrayal or humiliation or rejection or loneliness for the very first time. And it's a really fascinating outwardly experience. Just imagine that in a few short minutes you will have traveled to a completely different world. You will see yourself as a baroness, or maybe an Egyptian priestess, or a warrior, a soldier, or a slave, or maybe a king or a queen or a pharaoh. And you will not only see the images like a movie on a movie screen, but actually you will feel all the emotions of the person that you will see yourself as. Even if there is no healing value in this entire experience, it's just so much fun and so fascinating and bizarre and shocking, and you will be like, did I just see that, or did I just feel it? And that's what like nearly 90% of people that I regress say after the session. They're just like in shock and they're like in stupor. did I just see that? Whoa. And you see, the beauty of it is not obviously in the touristy, the past life tourism, as I call it, but in its profound healing that past life regression is offering. Why is that? How does it do it? Well, it's precisely because you can also feel the emotions of that person that you see yourself as. When you feel the emotions in probably a kind of similar situation as you're dealing with right now, but probably magnified. So, and when you feel those emotions, that's called catharsis. And when you feel catharsis, revelation, you have an opportunity to shift your perspective and to look at the situation differently. That new perspective allows you to see that that situation, however dramatic, tragic, or traumatic, it's okay. And actually you can deal with it. And you get an opportunity to rewire and reprogram your brain to react to this situation, this trigger, differently, without breaking apart, without sabotaging yourself, without holding yourself victim to maybe a codependent relationship or a toxic relationship or situation. To give you an example, just yesterday I worked with someone who was struggling and suffering from not being able to trust anybody, and especially men. And that happened a few years ago for her after a relationship gone wrong. She got cheated on by a man, and since then, and also, by the way, he was gaslighting her, basically denying the cheating. And so she felt betrayed. Betrayal was a massive part for her. And she just developed this fear, she got scared. She got scared and started to think that she cannot trust anybody, not just even men, but anybody at all. And she became paranoid about it. So when we regressed her, she saw herself as a woman in 16th century Mexico arguing with her husband on the piers. And guess what? They were arguing about the alleged betrayal, the cheating that this husband of her committed as she thought. And guess what? He was denying it. And he was basically saying, you made it all up, nothing ever happened, I've been loyal, yada, yada, yada. But the debate, given that it was Mexico, got so heated that in a burst of anger, he pushed her off the piers and she fell into water. And what she saw, the first moment she saw herself in the water, trying to get to the surface and being unable to. And she felt that same fear and sense of betrayal as she was experiencing right now in her current life. And it was so big that it basically consumed her entire being. Well, I mean, that's normal, right? Because the woman was dying. What was happening with the husband at the same time is he got scared too, and he tried to call her. He did not jump into water after her because, as she saw, he was afraid of water and he could not swim. And basically he let her drown. And we don't know what kind of repercussions that meant for him and what happened after. But what happened with her is that fear, because she died with that fear, got basically stuck with her. And in this life, that fear got activated when her ex cheated on her. She found out, and he was again gaslighting her, just like that man in Mexico. And she basically went into that same paranoia, distrust, feeling of betrayal, and headaches in this current life again. And she's been suffering with it for 4 years. And the suffering was so bad that every time she thought about it or was in a situation that required trust, she would have headaches, insomnia, and it was just a very, very stressful situation for her. So what happened in the regression session, because she relived it again, and she connected with that inner wisdom, basically with her subconscious, she saw that, first of all, not everybody cheats, and that she can trust people. She doesn't have to go all the way to being gullible, but she can trust, and she saw that it's healthy for her to trust, because not trusting was causing too much stress for her. And she saw that if she continued on this path of massive distrust, she would eventually end up rotting from the inside out. That, feeling of happiness in her chest that she was having every time in this kind of situation, that would just consume her entire being. And what we also saw, we basically asked her subconscious, how could this woman have relived her life in a more harmonious way? And the answer that she gave to herself was that if she loved herself first and more than that husband of her, it would have been a completely different story. If she loved herself first, she would not immerse herself and dissolve herself essentially in that relationship. And she saw that if this is what she did, the husband would be more attentive, more courteous, would basically follow her around like a puppy instead of her running up to him and having to see what's going on and being paranoid. And what we did as a result, we basically had her subconscious, first of all, make all that pain and trauma that she had accumulated in her chest and in her head dissolve and just make it go disappear. And we launched that program of dissolving all the trauma in her head and in her chest right during the session. And she saw that it would still take time even after the session, and we were able to set it up on the autopilot where she wouldn't have to constantly pay attention to this process. It would just happen without her paying conscious attention to it. So that's a pretty dope thing about subconsciousness. It can work without us paying attention to it. And at the same time, she gave herself advice on how she can live her life more harmoniously. Basically, love herself more, as well as advice on how to trust people more. And so that's a great example of how past life regression helps. Because you see, we try to do a what's called age regression for her, because usually all these traumas get triggered in our childhood. But when we tapped into her subconscious about the very first time when she felt betrayed, it turned out that that very experience with her ex was in fact the first time. So it doesn't really, it's still too raw and too too traumatic for her to actually deal with that specific situation. But when she saw a past life experience, which is obviously more removed and not as traumatic for her, she was able to get a new perspective and start healing herself. Another example that happened recently was with another client who was having money issues. And her issue was that she was perfectly capable of making income to cover her basic needs, but it's as if she was constantly hitting a glass ceiling and she could not break through it, make more money and enough money to live the life she wants and envisions for herself, have the impact she wants. And so when we regressed her, she saw herself as a medieval nobleman. And this nobleman, he was basically chasing after money and power, sacrificing his loved ones and pretty much everything himself for this Game of Thrones he was playing. And that was going on until he decided to marry his daughter to some prince or an heir apparent, and his daughter refused it. They had a big argument, and the daughter escaped. She escaped, and he found her dead. She drowned. And that was his only daughter. So what happened for him, he went into a downward spiral of blaming himself. And that opened his eyes on what he was doing his entire life. And basically, he just went into a drinking binge. He tried to talk to his wife. His wife rejected him, blamed him for what happened. And he ended up alone, and he gave his wife a divorce. And in 5 years, he went into a complete, he became a completely dead man. He was not eating. All his servants left him. His entire estate became abandoned and kind of like a wild castle. And eventually, after 5 years of suffering and being in this stupor of, oh my God, what did I do? He died. And after she saw herself die, in her case, she went into this life between the lives space where she met her spirit guide. It was not her first regression, so she had met her spirit guide before already. And so what we did, we talked to the spirit guide, she talked to the spirit guide to get guidance on how to rectify the situation, how to rewire this program. Because what she saw was that this program was still active in her life. And the program was that essentially she started hating money and she cursed money. The trauma and the tragedy was so big and so all-encompassing for her that she, as that nobleman, said, I hate money, I disown money, I curse money, I never ever want to touch money and power ever again. It's evil. And that's what she did, that nobleman did. He basically blamed money for what happened to him, instead of taking responsibility and saying, I did this. So when we talk to the spirit guide, the guidance was, see how you could have lived that life in a more harmonious way. So for example, and this is an actual example, what we did, we went back into that moment when that man, saw his daughter dead on the shore of some pond or lake. And how would he react to the same situation if he were to live it in a more harmonious way, with love in his heart, taking responsibility and so on. And what she experienced in that moment is that that man turned to God for guidance and for strength, and his relationship with God guided him to take responsibility and to see it in a completely different way. When that man took responsibility for what happened, and when he held that situation in the divine light, the situation shifted. That curse that the man imposed on money and cursing money and power was lifted. And with her, because this soul curses, this is what she experienced basically, these are quite strong programs. It's usually necessary to do more healing than just, okay, let's talk to our subconscious and see, how can we rewire this program. That usually takes either a few more regression sessions and being in that subconscious space to rewire, or what we did for the fastest result. First of all, we did this reliving the situation from a more harmonious standpoint, asking the spirit guide to heal and to lift this curse. In this case, the spirit guide refused to heal it and proposed that she relived the situation herself, which was very profound and very helpful for her. And then what we did a progression for her. We went into that moment in a time-space continuum when she saw herself living the abandoned life that she envisioned but could never quite grasp before. And so she saw that she was able to live the life she'd always wanted for herself. And that life, the dream for her, is building a healing center for adults. Her dream is to build this kind of a retreat center where anybody can come for their awakening. And they would stay there for 21 days or 30 days and have a 360 experience with healers, meditations, all sorts of modalities for healing and awakening themselves, and leaving this healing center as completely new beings. And so she saw the center itself, and she saw people who have experienced it and who have awakened and healed after having spent time in her healing center. And that just gave her so much power and healing and feeling abundance and being in her abundance. and feeling inspired of how she can use money and power for good, instead of trying to manipulate the people around her to achieve her ends, i.e. more power and more money. And so this happened just recently, so I cannot unfortunately yet report on the progress, but I do know that she got a very lucrative job offer, and she's in fact she has to move towns. She lives in Ukraine, so she has to move to the opposite side of the country to get the job, to take advantage of that opportunity. And when I spoke to her last, she was resolved to go and just give it a chance and try it out. And she would make maybe like at least tenfold of what she is doing, of course conditioned on the success of the project. But so even within the short time, we did that regression maybe a couple weeks ago, there is at least some movement, some breakthrough, even though it's still quite theoretical. But at least it seems like her glass ceiling of income has been broke in a quite dramatic way, should it all happened according to the plan right now. So this is how past life regressions look like, and this is how they can help. Thank you for watching, and please send me questions if you have any. I'd be delighted to answer and tell more about regression stories. Thank you. Bye bye. I forgot to tell you, please subscribe to my channel so that you get notified when a new video comes online. Thank you. Bye bye.